in the consumer market, like I would love to be able to have my nutrition data coming in for, from MyFitnessPal or whatever that might be, my data coming in from my workouts, my heart rate and stuff, and my sleep, all coming into one hub, and then giving me prescriptions based on the mass amount of data it has from all the other consumers at my fitness level or at my age, my gender, all these things, and give me prescriptions and suggestions. This is kind of like the concept that hasn't happened yet that I've been waiting for, and it is coming.
Hey, fitness fans, welcome back to the Future of Fitness podcast and interview series. This is your host, Eric Malzone, episode number 143. I talked to Mike Dawson. So Mike is the Director of Business Development over at Push up in Toronto. And, it's been a little while since I've done an episode on tech, fitness tech. And man, I love geeking out on this stuff. And it was a lot of fun. Mike knows it quite well. I mean, he's waist deep in fitness technology. And one of the big topics we covered was what's next? What's the next big evolution? You can kind of see and feel in the fitness profession that things maybe have gotten a little static. We had a big push of different types of tech, a lot of wearables and things like that. Then you start to notice things pull back. And Mike explains his theory on why that's happening is people don't know what to do with the data. And now that we're finding ways to, or people are staffing appropriately to manage the data, what comes next, right? Things like athlete management systems. Fascinating thing to me. I didn't even know it existed. And it's really interesting. So I think you're going to get a lot out of that. You're also going to learn a lot about what he does at Push and where they're coming to the mass market, hitting the general population with some really cool products and services, upcoming. And so just great information, great talk about tech. I learned a lot, and I always appreciate all the guys over at Push. They do a great job up there. So without further ado, let's get into it. Actually, more further ado, if you haven't yet, go to Elite Gym Insiders, free Slack community for anybody who's a fitness entrepreneur, gym owner, business owner, online, whatever it is. You want to get in there and be part of that community. It's a great place to network and learn, meet great people, and look for partnerships and joint ventures, all kinds of things that we do. And you'll see people like Mike Dawson in there as well. So go to elitegyminsiders.com, fill out the application. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll get you in there and we'll start chatting some more. And you'll get some discounts on great products and services upcoming, and you'll be glad you did. So elitegyminsiders.com. Now, without further ado, episode number 143 with Mike Dawson of trainwithpush.com. Enjoy the show. All right. And we're live. Mike Dawson, welcome, man.
Hey buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Greetings to you from Toronto, another Canadian, which every time I think I've interviewed at least 5 Torontonians. Is that right? Toronto.
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Yeah. It is now.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to see what Toronto is all about, which a lot of people I think in the States don't really pay a whole lot. It sounds terrible. Whole lot of attention to what's going on in Canada, and they should. I go in and out of Canada all the time, but what's going on in Toronto is special as far as like the technology scene there and how it's booming. And so knowing that you're in the middle of the tech, in fitness tech especially, it's going to be a great conversation. People can look forward to that. So Scott, Mike, sorry, I was just talking to Scott. Do me a favor. Give me a background. Give us your little bit of story, how you got to where you are with Push and all of that.
Yeah. So I guess from a general fitness, how I've kind of gotten into the space, coming in from, at a young age, obviously I played sports my whole life, just as probably most of us or any of the listeners did as well. But coming into lacrosse and hockey were my focus. And then when I turned around 16, lacrosse had the better chance of getting me to where I wanted to go at a high level. So I ended up focusing all my time on that.
Yeah. It's a booming sport, right?
Especially in the US. Like in Canada, it kind of has its ebbs and flows because it's been so popular for a long time. It's always been like a pretty popular summer game, obviously being the national sport for summer here. And, but in the US, the explosive growth, it's the fastest growing sport in the US for the past several years. So
cool.
That's also kind of reflected on Canada and some improvement here. But so when I was I think as soon as my dad let me start working out, I started hitting the gym, and that was obviously more kind of your typical just basic strength training. Probably around the age of 14 or so. But I always trained pretty heavily for sport and specifically, obviously, for lacrosse. And I ended up actually joining. I remember I joined, or my dad met a guy through work who was running an Olympic lifting gym out of his barn. And he took me there, and I was kind of like, you know what, this is way before Olympic lifting was cool and part of CrossFit. When CrossFit didn't even exist. And I went there and remember just being like, oh, I'm not really into this. I was like 15. And then a year later, I was like, you know what, take me back there. I think that might be cool. And I started training competitively, and this place was called Fury Weightlifting. And it was called Fury because there was an old Plymouth Fury car in the middle of the gym that he would work on while we were lifting. It was like so old school and badass. And I mean, now Fury still exists. I mean, the Dallas Santavi, who is a Pan Am competitor, now his son Bodhi Santavi is the top Olympic lifter in his category in Canada, and holds a couple records and is a junior kind of phenom. So I kind of trained in that world for a little while, and then I started as I progressed in my lacrosse career, I started finding that fitness in general was almost as important, and looking toward the off season to train hard again was almost as important as the sport itself. I just have always kind of been obsessed and started self-educating with, as T Nation was my homepage from like 16 till, young 20s. But
I love it.
yeah. So yeah, I've always just been passionate about the space. Went off to college, ended up playing or staying in Canada for college. I was looking at going to the US for a long time, but ended up staying here, won a national title in lacrosse here, and then kept playing. But once I actually, to get to push, I moved out west Canada, was working there, and I've always been kind of a serial inventor and entrepreneur, and I was looking to actually launch a business doing what Push does. And as I started kind of doing my due diligence and looking at the space and who would I be competing with, I found these guys at Push here in Toronto. And, they were at like Indiegogo campaign stage. So they were obviously ahead of me. I was just like in idea phase. And at that time I figured, man, like if you can't beat them, join them. So I might as well just join these guys. I always planned to move back east. And so I just kind of earmarked it and figured, when I moved back to Toronto a couple of years from then, this is back 5-6 years ago, I would call them up, and that's what I did. So I launched my own business kind of in the meantime while I was living out west. And when we moved back here, essentially, as soon as I got back here, I called up Push and was like, I'm going to come work for you now. And it's actually kind of a funny story and probably a good story for anyone out there looking for jobs. But when I reached out to them, I got in touch with their kind of HR. I mean, we're a pretty small company, so it was kind of their HR/operations girl. I was like, hey, like I'm going to come work for you. I'm going to kind of run your sales and even strategy and help you guys build this business. And she's like, I think we're good in that category. And I'm kind of like, okay. So I ended up, what I did, I think, so I wasn't getting through to anybody at first. And I went to the gym and just made this ridiculous chipper workout. And I named it whatever. And I took my GoPro and I made a video that showed like the Push job application is what I titled this workout on the chalkboard. And then I just went through it, sped it up, put it to music or whatever, and tweeted at them and said something along the lines of, I work even harder outside the gym or something corny to that effect. And, I remember it was like 14 minutes later or something, Chaps, who you've had on the podcast before, called me up, and then we chatted. And I think I started working with them, a few days later. So, yeah, it's just funny. It was I guess it worked to get through. Cause I mean, we get people reaching out. We're in the sports tech industry. Everybody wants to work here. Right. So
yeah,
I hit pass or even delete without reading on infinite, applications and people trying to reach out. So sometimes you gotta do that to get in touch, but that's kind of what led me here. So I've been now with Push for 2.5 years, and now we're doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. What a great story, man. It's so funny. It's like, how bad do you want a job? Like you decided I want that. Like, and I'm not going to settle for anything else. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you show that kind of conviction, most people just give up so quickly. They're like, well, I applied online. I don't.
100%.
Yeah. It just doesn't work. Not anymore. There's
no.
too many applications, and it's all about who you know and how bad you want it and how you can stand out. It's really awesome. Exactly. There's like I used to be a recruiter. Was my first job out of school, and I remember like I would look at hundreds of resumes, like on a given day, 100
Right.
recipes, right? And they all start to blend into one. And then I remember it was like someone sent me like this one that it was in a big red cylinder and it looked like a stick of dynamite. And I was like, what the is this, right? And then I opened it and I looked at it and it was like, hey, I'm a real firecracker, right? And I was like, wow, and back in that was back in the day
Hilarious.
we had social media and all that. And I was like,
Right.
God, what a brilliant lesson that was. It's like you really got to do anything to stand out because people.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So when you said that you wanted to get into tech, like what Push does, are you talking about like velocity training? Like how, like in what way?
Yeah, more specifically, no, I wouldn't say necessarily velocity-based training. I would actually, at that time, I wasn't familiar necessarily with the concept of velocity-based training that even in the past 3 years has exponentially grown. I mean, it was once known by a few select high-level strength coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the time, like probably most listeners and yourself, it was kind of when every day a new Fitbit type device was coming out. And I was kind of pumped when that whole trend started happening, kind of the wearables trend in the fitness space, fired me up as someone who's interested in tech and obviously in fitness. And then I'm just realizing every single one does the same thing. It counts my steps. At the time, it was step tracking, and then heart rate kind of came, and then GPS. I'm not an endurance athlete. I mean, sure, I do, I've done CrossFit heavily, but I'm not a distance athlete. And so steps is irrelevant to me. I'm at a level of fitness, like, many people who spend enough time in the gym, that none of that is relevant to me. And so I was always just like, man, where is the tech for me and for this massive group of people that I come and see working their asses off in the gym every day? There's nothing. And I would argue that still to this day, there's nothing. But that was what I wanted to build, and Push was kind of building toward that. And we're building toward that now in the consumer space. But I've always just been longing for that technology that finally caters to the massive audience that doesn't just go on the treadmill or ride their bike for 10K.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because like, what are the metrics that you look at for that type of training? And that was, James Fitzgerald, who, as well, we talked about this years ago. It's like, well, what are we tracking? Right. Because you look at any given workout, like, I don't know, let's use like a benchmark, like not Fran, because that's just too high intensity, like a Kelly, I think it is. It's like box jumps, wall balls, or running, and something else. Like you look at each one of those, right? Like you get some, you have some, I guess it doesn't have any weight training, so it's not that good. But if you had like a heavy thing and you had to run and then you had a body weight movement, the way your heart rate varies within a specific workout, and the way you're switching from anaerobic to aerobic to, there's no, like, what metrics are you guys looking at? Because it's a mystery. And I think once it's solved, people will just flock to it. Like, what is that 1 or 2 or 3, KPIs, for lack of a better term, that help with that?
Yeah. And that's kind of what I've been spending all my time kind of looking at lately. And so, I mean, you look at something like Orange Theory that's built an entire business on heart rate, and heart rate's obviously an important metric to track, and their business model has a lot of merit, putting you in certain heart rate zones, and that's great. But that's an internal measure of exertion. And to your point, if me and Rich Froning were to line up for the same workout, our heart rates are going to be vastly different for doing the same amount of work. And so, you want to get us both into the red, which for him is doing a lot more external work and moving load a hell of a lot faster than me. But what about measuring the rest of it and what he's doing externally? And so that's sort of the nut that's not been cracked, is measuring external exertion. So like looking at even a business model like an F45, that, they do now have their own proprietary heart rate, similar to what Orange Theory does. But, they're kind of, if I go to that class, I don't know how many reps I did. I don't know, did I go hard or not? I really am just judging by how much I'm sweating and how deep is my breathing. But they have cardio and they have strength, and which one kind of hit me in what ways. All these types of questions aren't really being answered. And so with Push, actually last year in 2018, we launched a subsidiary brand and kind of a project that ended up being a bit of a proof of concept of what we're capable of building, called Nexus. And we used the CrossFit audience specifically. And essentially all we did was we took the exact same hardware, like our Push Band wearable device. And in the pro space, it's used to measure velocity of every single rep and the power output. These metrics, to your average Joe or even a CrossFitter, really not that relevant. I don't really care how fast I clean if I'm doing 100 cleans in the CrossFit space. But that being said, the data that's being collected for us to give velocity and power in the pro space can be applied to metrics that are far more broad in general and easily actionable by that audience. So with Nexus, we created metrics like your total work output. So, that was measured in kilojoules, but that could be converted to calories in terms of expenditure and moving load across distance, whether that's a bar or your body or the wheel of a rower. We did things like work to rest ratio. So how much time you spent working compared to your bent over, catching your breath or grabbing a drink or even chatting, if, for some people who maybe aren't going hard enough. Your round splits. So any endurance athletes used to seeing their mile splits, we could do, round splits. These types of metrics are far more easily actionable. Obviously they're very CrossFit-esque, and that's kind of what we did at first, but it proved out that model, and we had to develop new IP that's never been created by any company before, where in the pro space, it's kind of, get down on the bench press, click the band to start a set. As you're ripping off reps of bench, it's giving you velocity live, collecting that data, and then you click when you're done, and then you take your 1-2 minutes rest. That's the S&C model. In CrossFit, I need to be able to do a 20-minute Metcon where I'm not looking at a phone. I'm not going to be messing with clicking any buttons. I just need to go. So we needed to create new sets of algorithms, a new machine learning engine that could differentiate and tell as you move from the rower to the pull-ups to the barbell without any need to do anything. So ubiquitous to your training, and then post-workout provide a breakdown of how you kind of attacked it, so that next time you can say, my cadence on my wall ball is absolutely cratered. I need to break those sets up a little more, things like that. And so that's what we built. And essentially it was, those metrics are an example, though they're kind of CrossFit-esque and maybe even a little too high, high intensity or high level for the average Joe.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of proved out that this tech could be applied down the chain to the broad consumer fitness market. And now that's kind of, what we're looking at doing is creating even more general metrics and creating a new system, leveraging Push's capabilities to come to the broad consumer market.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm curious, and you guys probably know this research. I mean, I know roughly how many CrossFit affiliates there are worldwide, but do you have any, like a general guess, because it would be hard to, but how many CrossFitters, how many like designated people who are, really, have committed to a CrossFit workout regime for, any given period of time, let's say like a year? Like, do you guys have any ideas on what those estimates would be?
I used to be able to rhyme them off when I was kind of deep in the hole of kind of CrossFit when we were building up Nexus and kind of figuring out what we were going to do with that project. I can't say it offhand, but I know, CrossFit now we'll talk about in the realm of say 15,000 affiliates worldwide. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I would say they never like to talk about it, but everybody knows that there's probably another 30% of unaccounted for that are not affiliated with CrossFit, but they're CrossFit gyms, functional fitness gyms. Sure. Right. And if every one of those has 100 or a couple hundred athletes, I mean, there's got to be a good, 20 plus million people that would say they affiliate with functional fitness.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. I was going to say like somewhere between 25 and 50 million, right? Probably. Yeah. I'll have to do that research too. So you've, being deep in the world of tech in the fitness realm, what, besides what you guys are doing at Push, but what else excites you about tech in the fitness field? Yeah,
there's so much going on right now, and there's been a lot of change in the past, call it even like 3 years. And really there's lots of parallels in what's happening in pro sport compared to now the consumer market. And I've made the comparison to you before, because we all are used to seeing like drones and other technology that was in military first, and then it makes its way down to consumer. The same thing happens in sports tech, where instead of military, it's more at the pro level. It's in the NFL, it's in, Premier League soccer, all these things. And then eventually it makes its way to Gold's Gym, and, maybe in a different form factor, but that's kind of the trend that typically happens. And back, I would say 3 years ago or so, there was kind of a time where every single pro franchise had these initiatives where they were told, go out and get data. That was the focus. They all went out and got, sure, there's lots of platforms that have a lot of value, like Catapult and GPS and all these other things, but they were just collecting data points across the board. And then it kind of went like this, and then it hit this peak where they all realized We don't have anybody on the data science side, and we don't even know what to do with all this data. And they'd spent a bunch of money, and then it went completely the other way, where they're like, man, saw all this off, let's bring it back down to kind of bare minimum that we need, and then slowly build back up more responsibly. And it seems the whole industry has learned that lesson. Now most teams have like a data science guy in place. And so that's kind of trend happened. And I would say it kind of coincided with the consumer market and the wearable space. If you remember, it was ridiculous, the amount of wearables that were being thrown out to the market for a while there. And it's definitely come down, and kind of we battled that at Push, where the consumer market got just overblown with all these promises, especially companies that were coming that never ended up even launching anything through, crowdfunding campaigns, saying they were going to do just the most ridiculous scientific things and weren't never even close. Most people in the industry knew it wasn't possible, but there's just so many promises. So that trend has all kind of ended, and now the companies that are remaining, I mean, even in our space, there's been 3 companies that have tried to come compete with us that have, closed their doors or might as well have. And it's just, it's difficult. And to do something that actually brings value is tough. And so that's kind of all happened. And now it seems that the kind of trend is, the right companies are still in place. New companies are coming out that have seen what's happened to the ones that failed. So they're coming out a lot more responsibly. The backbone in proper sports science is almost a must. Even if it's not part of your brand, if you're not valid, then you'll go the way of the Nike Fuel Band, right? The Fuel Band came out with Nike's marketing, which is a ton, was pretty cool in concept, and it gave one number that you were either higher or lower. It's very easy to understand. But as soon as the world found out that it had very little in sports science and the metrics weren't all that valid, it quickly died off, right? And so,
what was that metric? I mean, I don't even know what the fuel band is.
It was like fuel points, and it was just a metric based on like a combination of heart rate and activity and steps in general, and kind of combine those to come up with a metric that you're either doing more activity or less. And it was kind of a point system. But we've seen that happen multiple times. If it's not steeped in the back end in proper sports science, it's not valid, it ends up eventually consumers catch up. I was just listening to a podcast about microbiome and the things in probiotics that are happening right now, where every single company like Dove soap is making ridiculous claims about, it doesn't affect your microbiome of your skin. It's like, there's no science, but marketing always leads before science. Marketing will just spew it out. Consumers will buy it up, and then eventually it catches up. Right. But so in the fitness technology space now, there's a few things I would say I'm kind of excited about. The big one in general concept is that I still think that there is a ridiculous amount of data coming to consumers without any actionable insights. So even with the Apple Watch and some of the companies that are kind of leading the charge and doing, I would say, the best in the industry, it's still a lot of here's your heart rate variability, here's your sleep score. And people are supposed to just kind of understand that's good or bad. There's so many companies showing heart rate variability around as a buzzword without saying this is good or bad. So people are just like, they don't understand, why am I even collecting it? So now what's going to happen and what I'm excited for is sort of the prescriptive side of bringing in this data to now that kind of AI and machine learning has kind of been built up and there's a lot more accessible technology in that realm that companies can do using all that data to make prescriptions. So that's the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to. In the pro space, people probably aren't familiar with, but there's something called athlete management systems, or AMSs. And these companies or these platforms are bringing together data from, your GPS on the field, like your Catapult, your doctor, sports science doctors on the team and what they're doing for medical, checkups on the players, your functional movement screens. All these different things are all coming into one hub, and every player has a profile. It's very easy for them to see what all these things that encompass what this athlete is up to and how he or she is doing. I'm thinking, I've been waiting for that to come to the consumer market. It's been in the pro market for a long time. There's a lot of companies that have come and gone and some new ones coming now. But in the consumer market, like I would love to be able to have my nutrition data coming in from MyFitness or whatever that might be, my data coming in from my workouts, my heart rate and stuff and my sleep all coming into one hub, and then giving me prescriptions based on the mass amount of data it has from all the other consumers at my fitness level or at my age, my gender, all these things. and give me prescriptions and suggestions. This is kind of like the concept that hasn't happened yet that I've been waiting for, and it is coming.
Yeah.
That's one good thing.
Yeah. That's really interesting, man. I've been talking about something similar for a long time, almost like a, one dashboard, like to rule it all, where all of the stuff that the biometrics and all of that are being, taken in can be easily digested by people, and then they know what to do with it. Actual, actionable items that they can take into their life. And it's interesting. And I had a very fascinating conversation. I had an old friend visiting me over the last 4 days, and he's been working at Verizon for 19 years. He just took a very nice severance package. Now he's got about a year and a half to figure out what he wants to do. And very smart guy, very well educated. And he's like, well, what he's doing is he's taking 2 months and he's just reading and researching. That's all he's doing, and traveling. He's got 2 kids at home, so that obviously keeps him busy as well. But that's his primary focus from an occupation. So I was asking him, like, well, dude, what are you going to do? Like, he can literally probably go anywhere. And so he's trying to pick the field he wants to go into. And he's like, data. I want to go into data. And I'm like, God, that sounds so boring. He's like, it's not. He's like, once you get into the data, know how to organize it and pull the information out that you want, that you're looking for, it's so powerful. He's like, everything's about data and how you manage it now. Cause there's so much. I mean, God, apps I have on my phone right now, they're collecting data on me all the time. And, right. It's crazy what we can do with it. And you look at all the different, biometrics that are coming out. You mentioned a bunch, HRV, sleep, genetic profiling for nutrition, all this stuff. It's like individual pieces of tech that are coming out, but it's like, what's going to unite them all? And it sounds like the AMS is the thing that we're looking at for something similar to that. Who are some of the leaders in that field right now? Do you know?
The AMS field? Oh man, there's companies like, there's so many. Coach Me Plus, Kitman Labs, Kinduct, Smartabase. Those are some of the big names in the pro space. Mm-hmm. There's a new company coming right now that's backed by Microsoft that we're working with, called Empiricus. They're interesting. What they're coming up with and bringing to market real shortly, and they're just kind of coming up with their first couple pilot programs in universities. Essentially is doing what I've been hoping to see done. It's going to focus first on kind of the elite world and kind of the broad health market, because it's bringing in data from your EMR, like your medical record, your digital medical records from hospitals, and your whole history all into one hub that you as a person own. For example, if somebody gets an ultrasound and they go to a different doctor, someone who's pregnant goes to a different doctor, all of a sudden that doctor doesn't have their ultrasound. It's like, why don't I have my own ultrasound? It's my ultrasound, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
None of us have our own stuff. It doesn't make sense. So this is putting it in your hands. And the big reason why people don't have it, a lot of it is security. So this company is steeped in security, hence why they're backed by Microsoft and focusing heavily on that side. But that is one company that's kind of coming, and there's a couple others that are trying to get into this space and do things differently, because it's been a little bit stagnant. So yeah. But I mean, you mentioned all these metrics being split up and being on your phone. It's like a perfect example is the Apple Watch will look at your sleep, and Apple's latest iOS release looked at screen on time and being able to limit it and kind of do things like that. Why not correlate the amount of time you're spending on your screen and how close it is to bedtime with that sleep data? That seems pretty obvious and simple, but again, no one's bringing this together to give insights.
Yeah. There's interesting that I had the guys, I don't know if you know Tonal. It's a home workout equipment. It's all, it's electromagnetic resistance based weight training at home.
Yep.
And, the plans they have. Yeah. Yep. Really, really great conversation. And, we had, I don't know if it was on air or off air, but we're talking about where can all this go? And he's like, imagine something where you wake up in the morning, you've, whatever this AI is takes in your 23andMe results. It knows your sleep, it knows your HRV, it knows all these things. Right. And then, so it can say in the morning, we're like, hey, you didn't get enough sleep. Your HRV is running high. You seem stressed out. Your nutrition hasn't been on point. Let's take the workout back a little bit. We'll just relax, and we're just going to serve you up a breakfast of, granola and yogurt. Right. Because that's the best thing for you. And then, when you can today, take a 20-minute nap. I was like, mind blown, right? I'm like, oh
Exactly.
God, like, is that where we're going? Is this the full on Jetsons that we're going to be living in like the next 10 to 20 years? And it could be. I mean, it's all, I think all the tech is there, but once again, it comes down to the point of like, who's pulling it all together and what are they
Yeah,
doing and how are they making it digestible? Right.
exactly. I think that's the utopian future that anyone in the fitness tech or even wellness tech space is waiting for. And it will come. It's just a matter of who's going to be the one to pull it all together, because it's a beast of a project or business to take on that needs significant funding and cooperation with every company who's collecting data that is willing to share, and egos to be put aside in that respect in some way. So, I mean, it's a beast. So there's a reason it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I do see in the tech world, and you're in it, knee deep compared to what I am, but it does seem like people are sharing, concepts and ideas. Like it's more of a free open space, right? Like didn't Elon Musk release all of his plans to the world?
Yeah.
I mean,
There's guys like that have kind of
all his
helped, right?
designs.
But
Yeah.
it's even like Ursa in San Diego this past year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was the trend. I wouldn't say anything was particularly jaw dropping at the conference, but the trend that I noticed the most was that every single booth was talking about, or every company is talking about, open APIs, two-way APIs, pull our data in, we'll pull your data in, we want to play nice. That's kind of the trend. If you're not open to giving your data to other companies who want to use it or pulling in others, you're dead. That's just, luckily the trend has happened that way. So that's the start, a good start to kind of opening everything up.
Yeah. Explain to people who may not know, what is an API?
Yeah, right. So it's essentially all it is a way for me. It's sort of like your receptacle for me to plug in the data from, your company's pulling all this data from on field. I need to be able to have that data in a way that it can automatically integrate with my system and what data I'm pulling, and then put all that data together and do whatever it is we want to do. So essentially it's just from a tech standpoint, sort of that plug to make sure, you got the right plug on both sides that can pull that data in real time. So essentially some companies will not have an API, or it'll be closed, or it's not openly available, or you have to pay for it and heavily in order to pull in their data. But that trend is kind of changing, where now it's sort of like, some companies are even just making it publicly available. Come to our site. Here's the link to plug that into your code. And so that's kind of seems to be the way things are going.
So here's the big question, Mike. What does this mean for the fitness industry? The, atypical fitness professional, right? What do you think the next 10 to 20 years has in store for that profession?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know the quote unquote personal trainer space sometimes talks about, some fear of some technologies taking over jobs and these different things, right? But I don't know. I don't really see it that way, and maybe one day, but I think we're really far away from that, because the one thing that no system can do right now, and I can't see happening for maybe ever, is critiquing form. Sure, there's a level of motivation technology can provide by giving you different metrics, and maybe even, some systems out there that are, real-time people that can see you digitally and give you that feedback live while you're training. But I think the biggest thing is form and a bit of that motivation. And there's something to be said about being in person. I like the ideal use case where there's something about being at the gym that, for me personally, I don't think can be replaced. There are a lot of people out there, though, that don't want to take that 10 minutes to get their bag ready, the 15-minute drive, the change in the change room for 5 minutes, and then all doing the same thing on the other side, that makes a 45-minute workout an hour and a half. That's why systems like Peloton and others that have come to the market is a pretty attractive value proposition. So I think that trend is going to continue. That is the space that we're looking to play in and get involved, because our technology is the only tech in the world that could, from a weight training or, physical training off the treadmill or the bike or the rower, where we can actually monitor everything that you're doing. So Tonal's doing it with their specific machine on the wall. We can do that kind of that monitoring and that real-time feedback and collecting that data. We can do that with, moving whatever load it is you want, your body weight, kettlebells, bench press, whatever you have at home. And so we're looking to play in that space as well. But I think there's a lot of companies out there that they know that is growing, but they're also quite confident that people will still come into their brick and mortar location. They'll still come into the gym. I mean, that's how Peloton got off the ground, was opening brick and mortar. Peloton was not growing and things were not taking off. And John Foley, the founders, talked about this at length, but what made it take off was they opened a couple studios where people could come and get the experience. And that's what helped, right? So there's always a place for brick and mortar. It's just changing from just a store to an experience, and these different things, right? So I think the fitness gym is changing in the same way where, I think that companies are going to come where they can use technology like ours and like heart rate, what's being done by the Orange Theories of the world, and combining that to make an experience that is specific to that style of training. If it's high intensity interval training, we can have metrics and different feedback happening live that helps you get the most out of your workout. And then, post-workout analysis that helps you come in the next time and work on the right things. But you still need that coach to push you. You still need that, that help with learning skills. Skill learning is going to be really hard just with a video. And so that's kind of where I think things are kind of going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing that tech may never solve is empathy, right? Just understanding. I mean, you ask anybody who's a personal trainer, they'll tell you that they're unlicensed therapists, right? Because, most of the time you're just talking about someone's life. Hey, how you been? How are the kids? Right. And that's a hard thing to replace with that. And you look at I think everyone's going to have different needs at different times in their life. Like my same friend, let's talk about, he used to work at Verizon, has 2 kids, 4.5, 1.5, right? For him to make it to the gym is a monumental feat. Cause for him, he's got a Peloton. So he's like, well, if I put, both my kids happen to be napping at one point in time, I can just jump on the Peloton. I can get it done. Right. I was telling him about Tonal. He's probably going to order one, but and then there's people like me, I'm very routine, right? No kids, but I know, I can't wait to get to the gym, at 4:00 bell rings in the afternoon. That's where I go. I love the environment. I love I love that it's a place of self-improvement, right? I don't care who you are, if you're, 100 pounds overweight, or if you're someone who's been training for a long time, you come there to, for self-improvement. And most people are happy, right?
Of course.
Most people are happy in a gym. Isn't that cool?
Yep.
I mean, I look around that all the time, people are pretty happy here because they're doing something for themselves. And maybe they weren't happy the moment that they walked in. But once they start moving and they start doing the blood's flowing, the endorphins start to rise, and, serotonin and create, all those things happen, and people are happy. And I think there's something about that too. I mean, for me, it's either there or happy hour. And
exactly.
which one's healthier, right?
Yeah.
Which one gives me a better lifelong buzz. So yeah, I think it's interesting, what's going to happen. But I do think the human component, and I think part of that is the coaching, right? The cues, touching someone in the right area. We're like, oh yeah, okay, shoot. And I pull my shoulders back, right? It's hard. You can't do it.
No. And you mentioned the empathy side too. It's we're really excited about the potential of what our tech can do in terms of, while you're working out, we can see that your velocity is dropping on this particular movement, and maybe these other movements that are leg focused, you're keeping on an even keel, and this back focused movement is dying off. Well, now we can say, clearly your back is maybe a little bit lagging. Let's make suggestions, or let's suggest live with that data to say to take off some load. And that's exciting, and we're pumped about that. But that being said, you talked about the empathy side. If I'm with you in person, I can tell from your facial expression. You can tell me, man, my boss is riding my ass. I'm just mentally not here today, or I'm not sleeping. I have a 7-month-old at home, whatever all these things could be. That's the difference with personal training, that they're live in the moment to say, let's scale back your training. Like you mentioned, scaling back based on the data that Ali from Tonal was talking about. These are the kinds of things that personal trainers can do. And for tech to get to that level, it's a long ways away, if ever, that we can get to those kinds of levels, right? So I think it's going to be supplemental and provide things like Peloton, or things like what we're trying to build and looking to build at home will cater to a select audience and a pretty wide audience for convenience as being one of the major factors, right? I could see a lot of people like myself where I would maybe do this type of program at home those 2 days a week that my work day's nuts, or if you have kids, it's just I can't get away those days, whatever that might be. And then, there's maybe another couple days a week I actually like to go physically visit the gym, see some of the people there, see different faces, see a trainer, whatever, right? I think that's kind of what the world will move toward.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ultimately too, one of the big factors for a lot of people is time and friction, right? How can you reduce the amount of time or give back time, right, to people? And then how do you reduce friction on getting people to where they want to go? That's kind of the two big things that I think are really going to be focused on. And I think it's also easy for people who love fitness, people like you, people like me, get super into the tech, right? Love it. Love it. Can't wait to the next thing. Right. But for most people, overwhelming majority, just starting any type of program is monumental, right?
Yeah.
It's huge change. And, like you and I both have athletic backgrounds. We both, love to be in the gym. It's not a big deal, right? I talk about this all the time. Like, it's not a big deal. We like it. But for most people, just to I don't even know, well, what shoes do I buy? Right.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
exactly.
Like, what I walk in and I see a bunch of stuff. Like, what do I do with it? And I think that, when we talk about reducing friction, I think that's part of the technology can help, is reaching people where they are more effectively than having them, waiting for them to get to where you are. Does that make sense? Which is or the training setting, whatever it may be, a boot camp. So I think that's a big part of it too, is how do we leverage tech to get more people into a healthier routine, and therefore, solving a lot of problems that we have. What tech do you use, man? What do you use on a daily, weekly basis? What do you play with?
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how little I actually use. I mean, we use everything just for testing, at all times, and we're constantly testing the latest and greatest and figure out, how it works and this and that. But for me, I think it's also like yourself, at our level, which again is not the majority, is a very small chunk of the population. I don't need to track my macros. I eat very much like a paleo-esque kind of diet, but I know I have my diet dialed. I don't need anything to really track it. I don't personally find any real need for me to track sleep because I'm a really good sleeper. So, I don't, I know when I sleep bad. I know when I'm not sleeping good. I know how it affects my body. Most people aren't as in tune as you or I with our body mentally and physically. So for me, I don't actually use a ton. Obviously, I use our technology regularly because we're always, working on things. But yeah, outside of using some different apps and things for even workout programming and finding new routines and new things to try, I really don't actually use day-to-day a whole lot. I don't wear any tracker right now. I mean, I'm always trying new things for, a few weeks here and there. But for me, I haven't found anything at my level that gives me enough value that I don't already know. And so that again is a very small part of the population that, would be like that. I think there's definitely things out there that help people.
Yeah. Just a step tracker, right? I mean, and just how aware it made so many people of how little they move, right?
Yeah.
I even bet if you put a step tracker on me, I'd be shocked at how little I actually get up and walk every day, right?
Yeah. And it gives you that motivation, right? And that's another project that we have ongoing is kind of a new apparel project. And so we have a grant from the Canadian government. We're working with our Canadian Olympic team, a national team for this project. But essentially we've taken the sensor that's kind of about the size of my pinky fingernail that's in the push band. So that IMU chip, which is your accelerometer and gyroscope, that's measuring 3-axis velocity and acceleration. And so we've taken that and we've implanted 5 of those throughout a lower body compression garment. So like your compression pants. So we have, tibia, femur, pelvic, and then, tibia and femur down the other side. And now this type of technology can give us a ridiculous amount of data with respect to, stress fracture metrics, your impacts, how your different joint angles are changing as you run, things like that. So right now, on the market, what's available, there's a few, but Opto Track is one of them. Opto Jump, which, the track is, you could get for about 40 grand. You can get like 40 yards of track. That's kind of like lasers across, right? And so it's actually measuring how your heel strike is in these things. And that's what's used in like NCAA and pro track and field, but it's expensive as hell. And that's for 40 yards. So that's only getting your first few steps. Our technology, once we bring it to market, is going to be able to track the same metrics and more for a marathon. And that's for less than $500. And so now if I can see how did my running mechanics change throughout the marathon, or if a shoe company can use tech like this to try different types of shoes and tell you how your impact changes to your stress fracture metrics and how your joints are handling impacts based on a different shoe. Here's the shoe for you specifically. This is the kinds of things that are happening where the tech is finally getting past step trackers and these things. And companies are finding ways to make tech that's a little more actionable and has a little bit more meaning to kind of training and day to day. So we're obviously excited about that project as well. And it's kind of ongoing and sort of, looking about a year out before commercialization. We're very focused on getting it right, but another cool thing that we're working on.
Yeah. You guys are always doing cool stuff, man. I love talking to you and Chappie.
Yeah. We got a lot on the go.
Yeah, you always do. Right on. Well, Mike, where do people find you? If people want to find out more about what you're doing personally, and then obviously Push and all the cool stuff you guys are coming up with.
Yeah. So the Push website is very simple. Just trainwithpush.com. Train with Push is actually our handle for all of our social media as well. So you can find that there and kind of keep an eye out, through those channels on, over the next, call it, 3 to 12 months, depending on how some things shake out that we're working on from a financing standpoint and otherwise, the things that are coming down the pipe. But so I mean, and everything, on a personal level that I'm working on myself, Chris, we're largely, a lot of it's through Push. And so, a lot of, us can be found there. And, if anybody wants to reach out to Eric to get my contact details and reach out to me directly, I'm more than open to having conversations with anybody in the industry because, like you said earlier, the more we share, it's better for everybody. So I'm always open to those connections.
Awesome, man. Well, Mike, dude, thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks for geeking out. That was great.
Yeah. Love it.
Right on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Dawson.
Thanks.
Hey, fitness fans, don't leave yet. It's your host, Eric Malzone, and I have a quick favor to ask. Actually, 3 favors. So, number 1, if you're a fan of our show, I asked you to do something that takes under 3 minutes. Go to iTunes, please, and subscribe to our show. Please, please, please. It means so much to us. It's so important. And then give us a favorable review. We would really, really appreciate it. And I can't tell you how much it means and helps us out. So I know it takes 2 minutes of your day, and it means a lot to us. So please do that. Number 2, go to our YouTube channel, our Fitness Marketing Alliance, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel there. Number 3, if you like this episode or any of the episodes that we've released, share it on social. That's huge. That's a big deal for us. And we put a lot of work into these episodes, trying to give you great, actionable content for the fitness industry. So that would mean a lot. And that's it. So we have some big plans coming up for this show. I'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes. But thank you so much for listening. It means so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I love to hear from everybody. Eric, ERIC, at fitnessmarketingalliance.com.